All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Traffic Calming and Bikeway meeting for Apple Valley Road. We're meeting virtually here tonight on June 16th, 2025, 5:30 p.m. My name is David Greaves. I'm an engineer who works with NDOT on the traffic calming program, and I'm also joined by Nate Pickering and Anna Dearman. Nate and Anna, would you care to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name's Nate Pickering. I'm an engineer with LDA Engineering. We work with NDOT on the Bikeway program management, and we did the plans for Apple Valley Road.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending time with us this evening. My name's Anna Dearman, and I am the Walking and Biking Manager at the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure, or NDOT.
Great. So just so everyone is aware, this meeting is being recorded and it'll be posted to YouTube on Metro Nashville's page. So if anyone was not able to attend tonight, this recording will be available. For anyone who may be watching this recording after this meeting, we want to let everyone know that there is a live survey going on right now, and it will be open for at least a month or so. That can be accessed at engage.Nashville.gov/traffic-calming or by scanning the QR code that's on the screen. So to briefly cover the agenda for tonight, we're going to do a quick program overview, talk about a couple of projects going on Apple Valley Road. We also want to hear from you about what kind of issues inspired you all to apply for traffic calming or any other experience you're having on the street that might influence this project or any other designs. I'm going to give a run through of the traffic calming toolbox, so some of the things that we might propose to improve the street. And then we're going to share a preliminary design concept, some construction drawings or the beginnings of them anyway. We'd love to hear any feedback you have to offer, questions, answers, anything like that. And then we're going to discuss the next steps for the project. So jumping in, the quick overview of the traffic calming program is we're one that focuses on residential streets and proposing physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over a significant length. This is a program that primarily focuses on speed reduction with the hope of improving conditions for pedestrians, people biking, neighbors on the street. This is all closely related to safety and Vision Zero because vehicle speeds have a serious impact on how safe a roadway is. The infographic shown demonstrates that if a pedestrian is struck by a car traveling 25 miles an hour, they have a reasonably good chance of surviving. However, that starts to go way down as the speeds of vehicles increase. The traffic calming program is one that is in pretty high demand. So in March of 2025, when Apple Valley Road was selected, you were one of 600 plus streets who had applied. We were only able to select 25 neighborhood streets, and that was done with a prioritization process that I'll explain in a minute. But point being, y'all were selected because there was a pretty demonstrated need for something to be done on this road. There are a handful of tools that the traffic calming program does. There's also a handful program works with, but we might cover or we might run into some issues that, one of these projects is not really capable of solving. That might be a sidewalk or perhaps like a request for a traffic signal. We want to make sure everyone is aware of Hope Nashville as a resource for anything that may fall outside of the scope of things we're talking about tonight. That can be accessed by calling 311, going to hub.Nashville.gov online, or with the app. Screen just cut out on y'all. I'm not sure what happened there. Anyway, I think we're back. So The prioritization process is a formula that is weighted according to the pie chart to the left. Basically, when a street applies, we start the traffic calming project by conducting a study of all of the applications, and we measure vehicle speeds, volumes, crash history, whether or not there are sidewalks or bike lanes, and your proximity to trip destinations such as schools, libraries, parks, and a couple other things. All of this adds up to a score that is ranked among all of the other applications. And then when it's time to make the selection, we just take those top 25 streets. We'll get into some of the specific data that was collected for Apple Valley in a second, but we just want to make sure everyone knows this is a data-driven process that resulted in Apple Valley being selected. So some of that data went out and measured conditions on Apple Valley Road. The project is from Green Acres Drive to Conair Drive. We found that the 85th speed was 39 miles an hour. What that means is 85% of people that were measured were driving at or below 39 miles an hour, and 15% of drivers were driving even faster than that. That is pretty fast for a residential road like this, but it is one that has had the traffic calming on a different segment further down on Conniff Parkway. So it wasn't incredibly surprising that y'all are experiencing this pretty serious speeding. You also have a pretty good amount of volume, so 1,500 vehicles per day is a reasonable amount for a neighborhood. And then the width varies quite a bit. So at its narrowest, it's around 26 feet wide, and at its widest, it's about 40 feet wide. And we can talk about how that affects some of our design decisions in a little bit. But all that is just to say, we've observed that you are experiencing a pretty fast pattern of travel along this road. I know I've covered a lot of introductory information. I want to take this moment to pause and just ask, do you all have any questions about what I've covered so far? Any other thoughts? Got it. Well, that's fine. We also have the chat open if anyone would prefer to ask questions there. I'll see it and I'd be happy to answer. But if not, we can move right along. So this is a map of the project in yellow. The red line is the traffic calming project that was applied for and selected. And the yellow line actually represents the longer repaving and bikeway upgrade project. So we're going to see plans that touch on both of those things. Wanted to just be transparent about the history of this project and how the limits got a little longer than the ones that were initially requested through the traffic calming program. This is a screenshot of Nashville's live traffic calming tracker. So you can see the blue dashed line to the left is Conniff Parkway. Y'all are probably aware that that's a traffic calming project that was completed a little while ago. And then these purple lines are other streets in your neighborhood who have applied for traffic calming. There will be a link to the website where this can be accessed toward the end of the presentation, but it is on Metro's website, and it's a good way to kind of keep track of the status of different projects around the city. So at this point in the meeting, I want to just kind of take some time to ask the attendees, what about Apple Valley Road are you looking to see changed, or do you have any specific concerns that you'd like for us to know about and then address as we present the conceptual design that's been developed?
There's, I had one question.
Sure.
There's one particular intersection. It's pretty much right where that red line ends, that we've noticed. It's a four-way stop and cars just plow through there all day long. I've seen at least one or two accidents over the years at that intersection, and I think one of the things we were curious about is whether I guess I've noticed there's like speed bump things kind of throughout the road, but they're not right at that area. Do you know if there's any plans to add any more of those at different spots or anything like that?
Yeah, that's definitely a component of the design. Do you mind if I ask, is it in both directions that people are running the stop signs, or do you think that one street gets it a little heavier than another?
I think Apple Valley gets it heavier, but I've definitely seen people on Graycroft coming through as well.
Got it. Yeah, that's good to
Or
know.
sorry, Hamlin.
Yeah, oh, got it. Understood.
This is Arturo Mariscal. I also want to add that, yeah, I agree with Pete. North Graycroft, I've seen a lot of people running those stop signs, and also right there at the four-way on Apple Valley.
Got it. Yeah, that's good to know. And we can definitely take a look at that in our design and think about how we might improve that. Any other observations or thoughts before we talk about some of the tools in the traffic calming program?
Yeah, Aaron Coleman here. I had a comment. So I live on the corner of well, guess where Apple Valley turns into Cuniff. And the thing that I've noticed is when people are going from Apple Valley into Cuniff, that intersection is absolutely massive, and people take that turn at a pretty high rate of speed. So that's just the main concern there. It feels like they also take that turn so close that you'll see oftentimes that my yard is a little bit rutted up, where cars sometimes just run off the road, that they're taking the corner so close. So it's difficult for me to walk my daughter to her preschool at the church across the street through there, even with the speed bumps in place.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely good to know. So yeah, I know that there are speed bumps on either side of Green Acres Drive there. And I'm sorry to hear that that was not the complete solution that we were hoping it might be. Now, am I understanding correctly that it is vehicles turning from Apple Valley Drive, like onto Green Acres or West Campbell, or is it sort of in all directions that that sees those fast turns?
I see the fast turns primarily people coming from Apple Valley turning onto West Campbell.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, we can certainly. Yep.
Sorry, we were just also going to add the speeding is anywhere that the speed bumps are not already in place. It's like once they end, it seems like people just pick up speed and maybe like they're kind of racing. Like there are a lot of sports cars that come down the road.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely traveling at a higher rate of speed than you reported. So
Yeah.
we see that pretty frequently as well, and just wanted to add that. So it seems to be happening in multiple areas.
Yeah, that's good to know. And it is always important to remember that when we report an 85th percent speed, that's only a sliver of the picture. It's not the upper bound of how fast people might be traveling. So definitely good to know that you all kind of agree that speeding is happening, because it does create some serious inconveniences. Great. Well, why don't we move on to some of the tools? I can try to address like how we might use those in the design to address some of the concerns we've heard so far. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate, who's going to walk us through the preliminary concept design that he's developed. But we certainly want to hear your thoughts, any other ideas, and how we might alter the plan to best fit your needs. So moving on, the first tool that we talk about in our toolkit is speed cushions. By a pretty wide margin, these are the most common tool that we use in a given traffic calming project because they really reliably slow down vehicles on average. To one of the attendees' credit, we know that they're not a foolproof solution that forces every single person to drive safely. But in general, they have an effect that improves the data on the street. Speed tables are really similar. They're made of the same modular rubber materials. They're the same height at 3 inches. The only difference is that they stretch all the way across the road instead of having these gaps. The gaps are an intentional design decision with the thought that they would help emergency vehicles with wider wheelbases be less impacted by them because they can kind of come a little closer to shooting that gap a bit with their wheels. Maybe they do touch it, but kind of hit those tapered sides, whereas a smaller car or a light truck would be more impacted by the speed cushions. I mentioned that we find these to be pretty reliable. What we're looking at here is the results of a limited study that NDOT conducted in 2023, where we took some before and after data. We can see over 6 projects, the average speed came down from 31 to 22 miles an hour. And then the 85th percent speed, that stat that we talked about earlier, came down from 37 miles an hour all the way to 25. So y'all were a little bit higher than that at 39 miles an hour, but even so, we feel optimistic that a design featuring speed cushions or other vertical measures would drastically improve the speeding situation that we're currently seeing. Now, speed cushions are not available in every single spot. We try to avoid curves. We have to avoid steep hills. So there are plenty of occasions where we can't rely on them exclusively. In those situations, we'll often pull out what are called radar feedback signs. These are solar-powered signs that report the speed the driver is going back at them in comparison with a speed limit sign. So importantly, these are for information only. They don't write any tickets, do any other kind of enforcement. They're simply a reminder that if you are going too fast, that you should slow down, but they don't do anything to like physically affect one's driving. Similar, we have what's called pavement narrowing. So when a road is wider than it needs to be to move the traffic that it's supposed to move, that can induce faster speeds because drivers are a little more comfortable going at a higher speed and kind of knowing that they've got room to work with. As opposed to a narrower street feeling a little more claustrophobic and inducing a bit more caution from the driver's perspective. Again, these don't physically affect vehicles like speed cushions or tables do. They're more of a psychological measure to induce lower speeds just kind of by changing the feel of a roadway. One side benefit of this is it can kind of help pedestrians who need to walk on the road if there aren't any sidewalks. These are a nice way to provide a little bit of a shoulder just so you can feel a bit more confident walking on one side of the line where cars should be on the other side of the line. Again, it's not a physical barrier, but it is something that makes pedestrians feel a little more comfortable at times. So similar to narrowing along the length of the road, when we have really large intersections, that can induce speeding at the turns. So we all kind of have a feel for when you may be turning onto like an interstate ramp or something with a really wide radius, we're able to take that turn much faster than, say, if we were like making a hard right into our driveway. Those are sort of two extremes on the turning radius speed relationship. So when we see an intersection in a neighborhood like this that has really large turning radii, what we can do is kind of narrow the intersection from the outside in, tighten up those corners, and that helps to make sure that vehicles take their turns through the intersection at a slower rate. This can make it much more comfortable to walk and bike, knowing that you're not going to be surprised by a turning vehicle. If you're driving, it gives you more time to notice if a pedestrian or cyclist is crossing the road so you don't run into them. And it also shortens the distance that pedestrians need to cross because you don't have to cross all the way from corner to corner. You're really just crossing the 2 lanes of travel. In neighborhoods that see a lot of street parking, they can also help improve sight lines by making sure nobody is like blocking visibility to crosswalks. So that's another added benefit of these where there is street parking present. So sometimes when we have pavement that is not being used, this could be in the case of bulb outs or maybe shoulders, perhaps like more curb extension kind of treatments. Occasionally we'll do something called depaving. So depaving is where existing asphalt that's not needed for vehicles is actually removed and it's replanted with either grass or some other kind of landscaping. And this has a couple of benefits. It reduces stormwater runoff by absorbing rainwater into the earth. So when rain hits asphalt, it kind of has to go either into somebody's yard or a ditch or the sewer. It can't seep into the pavement. It's also a good way to increase green and open space. So we all generally prefer to look at plant life, grasses, things like that, rather than asphalt that's maybe not necessary. And when the sun hits asphalt, it actually heats up the ground much more than if the sun was shining on dirt or leaves or trees. So depaving can reduce the temperature in the summers by kind of reducing the heat island effect, which is when in highly paved areas get hotter than they otherwise would be because the pavement is there. So what we're looking at on the right in those images, the first one with the food truck is kind of the beginnings of a depaving project. It's not super attractive, but the disturbed earth is stabilized with seed and straw. And then after a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, the hope is that will grow into a nice lawn and we'll sort of have a transition from the pavement to grass like we see there in the right-hand corner. We've done this a couple times in Nashville, not a ton, but one example is Clifton Avenue. So here's just a little before and after picture where the image on the right, or on the top that is the before. And then after the project was done, we were able to add a little bit of landscaped area where that pavement was not being used. Now, I will say the stormwater conditions in Apple Valley Road are not quite the same. Y'all generally have the asphalt just end in the shoulder rather than curb gutters and storm pipes. So we may not build like a little channel like this in any case, but the idea is to add grass and generally get rid of asphalt that's not really doing much. On wide sections of road, we sometimes do what's called chicanes. This is where we take the center line of a roadway and zigzag it back and forth. This induces slower speeds by forcing drivers to kind of maneuver as they travel along the length of the roadway. Generally, it only works when we have enough pavement to safely go back and forth and enough length to transition in between. We definitely don't want to surprise anyone with this and wind up with like a head-on collision. So we do whatever we can to avoid that. And the only real downside that this has is sometimes it affects the amount of on-street parking because we sort of shift both travel lanes all the way to one side. And at that point, you wouldn't be able to park in the lane there. I don't know if that necessarily applies to any particular places on Apple Valley, but it is something that we do from time to time. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. These work similar to bulb outs, but rather than narrowing from the outside in, we narrow from the inside out. So this works like a roundabout. All drivers are expected to kind of start by going right. And then if you're making a right turn, you just keep going that way. And you traverse counterclockwise around the circle if you're looking to go straight or if you're looking to go left. That's it on tool. What we have here is the traffic calming project portion of Apple Valley Road. You'll see to the right, that is where the existing bike lanes would begin. So in the plans you're about to see, you're going to get both areas. One where we have bulb outs, speed cushions, some depaving, and then off to further to the east is the kind of bike lanes area where we have some other improvements that Nate's going to talk about. But before we dive in, I want to just kind of check back up. Does anyone have questions about any of the tools we've discussed? Great. Well, I'll turn it over to Nate. Feel free to ask questions at any point, and then we'll also have time for questions and discussion at the end. But Nate, please go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. And if you guys have specific areas you want to look at in these plan sets, we'll be going through them, not necessarily page by page in full detail, but if there's specific locations you want us to look at, then I will gladly stop and spend as much time as you feel you need on that as we go over some of the designs we put in. So we did a speed cushion layout for the majority of the project as shown in the previous highlighted portion. We carried from the rest of it, we were doing an existing bikeway improvement on that buffered bikeway to really create that separation. And I jotted down a few notes about the West Campbell that we've covered earlier, so we'll be looking at that as well. But we already are including some bulb out portions there, so we will be aiming at reducing those turning speeds coming in and out. We have that protected by some flexible delineators with some striping. And the goal really with this intersection was to make it safer and more accessible. And so we reduced the travel lane width in each direction down to the acceptable minimum. Now, this also includes the retention of centerline in this area, just to make sure as these cars are entering the area, they are safely separated. And it will immediately go into our speed cushion layouts. Now, with the speed cushions that we've included here, we are doing 2 speed cushion installs, as well as flexible delineators attached on each side. These flexible delineators are placed such that cars can't easily go around the speed cushions. Now, they are plastic posts, so cars can generally just drive over them. We do not like it when they do that, and if they continue to do that, then we will be more physical with the response and next to it. The area highlighted in teal is de-paving proposal, so really aiming at reducing that intersection turning radius for good. Whether or not people decide they want to run over the striping or the delineators, we will be removing set amounts of asphalt throughout the road such that it will permanently create that turn hardening effect. We are increasing signage through the road just to make sure people are aware and are slowing down and have correct notice for the speed cushion layouts. With the speed cushion layouts, we try to keep them at about 300-foot separation. There's a few areas where it leans a little bit longer and a little bit shorter in between. We have to maintain certain distances from each intersection and from each driveway such that you aren't impaired as you're trying to get into your driveway or out of it. Now, on these intersections, can you go back one? Sorry.
Yeah.
On these intersections, like this is I believe that's Hamblin. Sorry, Mike. Can you zoom in a little bit? I apologize, David.
I don't know if I can actually zoom in on PowerPoint.
That's fine. That's fine. This is Hamblin that we've highlighted here. It has fairly extensive de-paving. The de-paving is the dotted area you see on each corner. With this highlighted de-paving, it won't directly affect people running the stop signs. What it will do is condense that intersection and give you a lot greater sight distance at each area and make people more aware as they're entering it. With the increase in speed cushions, they will be going slower on approach to the intersection, hopefully promoting a safer intersection and less people running stop signs. We have sharrows marked throughout the project to highlight it is a shared route and cyclists can share the road with cars. We have more turn hardening and de-paving on these intersections. And here's Graycroft. We've done a very similar design to the Hamblin intersection and making sure we have speed cushions on each side of the approach and increased de-paving. So down here, we have the transition into the existing buffered bike lane. What you're seeing here is a proposal for increased separation, more physical separation. we have a new product called a cycle lane, and it is a about 4-inch high plastic. It's about 2.5 feet long piece of rubber that is meant to deter traffic back into the lane. It's not as physical as an armadillo. If you've seen those, we've installed them at Riverside Drive and a few other places. This is very intentional to push cars back into the roadway as opposed to just being a physical bump to drive over. And it creates more separation and a safer environment for cyclists and anyone walking along that roadway. And this is an existing buffered area. And we're looking at these intersections as well with turn hardening, not necessarily depaving because there is some curb in this area. And so whenever you start to depave those areas, you have to check with stormwater areas and make sure you're not redirecting any of that water into any neighbors' houses. And so this continues all the way on to the finish of the project here at Conair, connecting into the existing bikeway. And again,
Awesome.
if you have any specific places you want to check on, feel free to post those and I'll happily cycle to it and we can look at any specific problems you have.
I see Pete has raised his hand. Pete, what's up?
It's actually his wife, Allison. I used to live on Riverside Drive, so I was we saw the armadillos and they were pretty quickly damaged and oftentimes not replaced. So if something is damaged with the plans that you have here for the bike lanes, how will that be handled in terms of like replacing those and repairing those?
Yeah, great question. So actually right now on Riverside, we have just installed new delineation. So that's partially in response to Hub Nashville request. Hub Nashville is great. We obviously can't be on all, 2,000 miles of roadway in a day. And so it's great when the community lets us know there's an issue. The other reason why new delineation is currently being added to Riverside is that we're systematically going through all of our bikeways and we're upgrading that separation between the bike lane and the driving lane. So certainly it's amazing how these devices take a beating and we're not able to replace them immediately. They're intended to be struck actually hundreds of times. And so it's unsightly for sure, but they are serving their purpose. And so there are a few different options for delineation that we can use. But other than Hub Nashville request and that systematic replacement, we're not able to inventory all of these materials on an annual basis and refresh them, for example.
And to add on to that as well, Riverside was very high traffic and the road itself has a lot of curves. And so naturally we expected people to be a little bit more prone to hitting those areas. Now we're increasing that protection there at Riverside in hopes to reduce that maintenance. And what we're looking at installing here, we've had really good track record with the cycle lanes as far as maintenance goes currently. And using those in combination with the delineators, we believe that will lead to a further reduction in maintenance needed along these routes.
Thank you.
Great. Well, do we have any other questions before we talk about the next steps in this project's process?
Yeah, I guess the only question I had was what makes you determine to use the where you take the land away from the corner and the bulb outs? What makes you decide to do that over the roundabout? I'm curious.
Sure. So there's a lot of things that go into that. A lot of times with traffic circles, we really want to check and make sure that we still have adequate turning radii for emergency vehicles. And so In neighborhood roads, when we install those, we have to make sure that the associated fire trucks can make those turns. In areas where we believe there may be turning, the radius isn't large enough for a fire truck or a school bus, we can use deep paving, as those trucks and the school bus can occasionally use that corner and the grass as opposed to driving over top of the traffic circle. There's a few other factors that go into it, such as sight distance and any sort of approach distance between them. And those kind of factor in. It's also with uniformity. We want to make sure people can expect what's coming up in each intersection or along a road so they can react to it appropriately. So introducing traffic circles at random points can, while be effective slowing people down, it can also lead to an increase in accidents, at least temporarily while we install it.
Thank you.
I'll just chime in. Another of the goals of the deep paving is to reduce impervious area. So that's surfaces like pavement, asphalt, where rain and stormwater can't infiltrate, and so it just ends up running off with all of those, nasty particles from the road into our waterways. And so, as you acknowledged at the beginning of this meeting, that problem of the intersection is so huge, and so people turn so fast. That's because the radius of those corners is really, really large, even compared to neighborhoods like where I'm sitting in Inglewood, just a couple miles away from you all. So if we can shrink that intersection, then it'll have a traffic calming effect. And it also has like a green infrastructure livability effect in reducing the urban heat island effects that pavement contributes to, as well as improving the quality of our waterways. So we're meeting a lot of goals. Traffic circles can certainly be planted, and so those can, have a livability, a greening effect as well. Roundabouts in particular are typically used for traffic control, for stop control. So, a stop sign tells the drivers what to do when they approach the intersection. Same with a traffic signal, same with a roundabout. Those are really intended to manage who has the right of way at locations where there's a pretty high volume, and there are typically lots of people approaching at the same time, and you really need that traffic control device to help provide order to who goes when. Traffic circles are a smaller version of a roundabout that are used more for traffic calming. So you can use traffic circles even if you have stop signs or without any traffic control. The purpose is more to slow you down rather than to tell you who goes when. So the traffic circles are another tool that we use in the traffic calming program. In this instance, we're just looking to meet those multiple goals of livability and traffic calming by depaving. And to be transparent, we are proposing to kind of test this out. We've depaved unnecessary portions of streets and other locations. We've not tried this depaving the curb radius, but we're really excited about this opportunity to meet those multiple goals of livability and traffic calming.
Great. Well, any other questions on the plans? I've got the program flowchart pulled up right now, but we can just kind of chat about whatever, unless we're ready to move on. Okay. So just kind of a recap of how the traffic calming program typically works. Y'all may know this starts with an application from residents on the street. We do 2 cycles per year where we choose 25 that ranked the highest. We then do the prioritization and selection process using that formula that we talked about earlier. And then tonight we're here at the red circle, the first neighborhood meeting. So you all have seen those mailers come to your mailbox advertising this and the survey. We're meeting tonight virtually to discuss the toolbox, the concept design, and next in the process, we're going to kind of take this feedback and make sure that the design plans we have are really meeting your goals and incorporating any feedback we can before we move on. So next, we can either schedule a second neighborhood meeting where we kind of update everyone on how the project design is going. But then after that, we're going to go to construction and get this project built. Now, you'll see that the timeline for construction is 8 to 10 months. That's for a typical traffic calming project. I've got some good news. This road is actually slated for repaving. So in all likelihood, it would be significantly sooner than that, potentially later this summer. I think that's it. Do we have any other questions or things to discuss? Up on the screen right now is my contact information down at the bottom, as well as Nate's and Anna's. And then just a reminder for anyone who may be viewing the recording, or if you're on the call now and just have feedback to offer online, the survey, which is currently live, can be accessed at engage.nashville.gov/trafficcalming. Any other final thoughts?
David, let me say a couple more things while folks are thinking if they have any final questions. Typically with the traffic calming program, you know, a neighborhood applies, they're selected, and then they vote on the traffic calming. Because we are installing these bikeway upgrades for this planned bikeway, we actually need traffic calming as part of the bikeway facility. And so even if your street hadn't been selected for traffic calming, we would actually be pursuing traffic calming on the street as part of the bikeway. And so for that reason, we're not holding the typical balloting process. We're holding this meeting, and we can have another if you all need to talk through what this design looks like, what you're interested in. For example, you know, I hear your questions about the vertical delineation and totally understand that, you know, the white plastic posts are not necessarily folks' favorite things to see out of your front window. There are a few other options. I just put a link in the chat to Google Maps Street View of San Marcos Drive in Nashville. This is a street where, as I understand it, this is a traffic calming project. We put in a walkway on one side of the street, and in that buffer, we put in these rubber curbs. So that's another option, like a low black reflective rubber curb. There would still need to be some white plastic posts just for visibility. But I'm curious if you all sort of have a preference or have any feedback around those materials.
Me personally, I really don't care what it looks like at all. It could be as gaudy as whatever if it's going to mean that people drive slower and I feel safer in my neighborhood. I know I'm probably in the minority, but I mean, whatever, if you all have studies that show a big blinking yellow loud thing makes traffic slower, I say go ahead and put it in.
Have you taken data on San Marcos about the effectiveness compared to the white posts?
No, I don't know that we have ever tested like the delineation types. What we know is even restriping, so even like striping the lanes closer together, just adding bike lanes, adding any type of vertical delineation slows people down. So it's that lane narrowing, the traffic calming that comes through lane narrowing, adding different mobility facilities to a street, all of those things slow down traffic. I don't know if we've collected data like pre and post traffic calming project on San Marcos. I know we have collected data for some traffic calmed streets.
Yeah, we do like to do pre and post analysis of safety improvements specifically and any sort of bikeway improvement we do to try to contrast that data and have that available. It's one of the beautiful things about why I love my job is every single project is individual and unique in its own ways. And so it's finding roads that are linked to each other in some form or another can be challenging at times. And so we want to make sure whenever we do that data and provide those reports that it is something accurate to your environment. And so
Is one more like is one safer for bikers than the other? For cyclists?
So the safest thing for a person biking is like concrete separation or protection. That's not always feasible, just depending on the type of construction project. So typically with a repaving project, the purpose of the paving project is to improve the condition of the pavement. It's not intended to be like a full street rebuild. And so we have limited options for like how deep we can go, basically. We could mount concrete curbs like you would see at the front of a parking space. That's an option. That's kind of what these rubber curbs are like. Like if you've ever, noticed the little wheel stop at the head of a parking space. So that's an option. I mean, people biking have different opinions based on the way that they ride as far as what makes them feel safer, but a curb is going to really deflect that encroaching driver better than plastic.
Hello. Could I ask about the stretch of road near Conair? There's almost a straightaway there that cars do like to drive quickly and loudly.
I've got those pulled up on the screen right now. So Con Air here to the very right end of the project, and then it does look pretty straight and it continues straight and it looks like it starts curving just after Nelson Road. So is that whole part sort of what you're asking about?
Yeah, up until the curve. So that part of the road, it kind of dips down and then goes up to that curve if you're going west.
Yeah. And are you asking specifically about
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any way that a speed cushion can be put on that stretch, or if that's a bad place for it.
yeah, we can absolutely look at that. A lot of times when we look at these areas and for the separation of utilities, such as separating cars from more vulnerable users, such as cyclists and pedestrians, we really look at that physical separation first. In this point, we did reduce the traveled way down to the minimums to try to dissuade speeding. But looking at this, that is a straight stretch. You can absolutely look at adding some cushions along there. At first glance, I am seeing a lot of driveways in association with that, so it may be hard to find a suitable location that's really going to increase that, but we can absolutely look at that.
Yeah, so there's a stretch where the large power lines go over, where there are no driveways.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So yeah, it would be just to the left third or quarter of this image. That's just fields, no driveways.
Yeah, we can absolutely look at that.
Thanks.
Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? On the screen, I've got some NDOT social media handles if y'all care to follow. And then that website has a QR code that's up as well. But we're happy to stay on for any other discussion as well. Sounds like we're probably covered. Really appreciate everyone's time this evening. Thanks for hearing us out and learning more about the project. And again, this is going to be posted to YouTube. So if any of your neighbors weren't able to attend but want to, see the presentation, feel free to direct them to that. And then we do, like we covered, have that survey live so they can share any feedback they have that way, if they so choose.
Thank you.
I will go. Sure thing. I'll go ahead and stop the recording right now.